The galaxy had been organized for 10,000 years, and every species knew the rules that kept the peace across the stars. From one end of space to the other, civilizations followed the same pattern when they discovered faster-than-light travel. They sent out careful signals. They waited for contact, and they accepted the guidance of those who came before. The Galactic Council made sure everything stayed orderly and controlled because order meant survival and chaos meant war. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Frontier and watched the stars stream past the viewport as his ship cut through space faster than light itself. He was a man in his early 40s with gray starting to show at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of service. The breakthrough in faster-than-light technology had come suddenly, when Dr. Lisa Hamilton solved equations that scientists said were impossible. Within 5 years, humanity built this ship, and now Jake was taking it farther from Earth than any human had ever gone. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, and Jake could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what they might find out here. 3 months ago, one of Earth's automated probes detected artificial signals coming from deep space. The patterns were too organized to be natural and too widespread to be anything except a massive communication network. Someone else was out here, and they had been out here for a long time. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper sat at the navigation console with his hands moving across the controls. He was young and confident, born on Mars in the first generation of humans who grew up calling another planet home. His voice was steady when he spoke. "We are approaching the boundary now, Commander," Ryan said without looking up from his screens. Chief Engineer Maria Santos checked her displays and nodded. "All systems are holding steady and the full drive is performing better than expected," she reported. Maria was the best engineer in the fleet, and if she said the ship was ready, then Jake believed her. Jake watched the sensor readings as they crossed into what the probe had identified as occupied space. Out here 47 light-years from Earth, the darkness was filled with invisible transmissions that crisscrossed between hundreds of star systems. The galaxy was talking, and humanity had not been invited to the conversation. "Contact," Ryan announced suddenly, and his voice carried an edge that had not been there before. "We are receiving a transmission on multiple frequencies, and it is translating into mathematical sequences. Put it through," Jake ordered, and he stepped closer to the main screen. The message appeared as text after the computer processed the mathematical language into English. The words were simple, but the tone was not friendly. "Attention, unregistered species. You have entered regulated space without authorization. Cease all motion immediately. Await containment. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will result in sterilization protocols." The bridge went silent, and Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. This was the moment that would define everything. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had been watching Earth without making contact, and now they were issuing orders like humanity was supposed to just obey without question. The message was clear enough. Stop or die. Jake had spent months preparing for this moment, and he had read every analysis and recommendation from Earth's best strategic minds. Some said humanity should be cautious and accept whatever terms the aliens offered. Others argued that showing weakness now would set the tone for every interaction that followed. Jake had made his decision weeks ago, but actually giving the order was different than planning it. "Open a channel on all frequencies," Jake said quietly, and his voice was calm despite the weight of what he was about to do. "Maximum broadcast power." Ryan turned in his seat, and his expression showed concern. "Sir, are you sure?" "Do it, Lieutenant," Jake said, and there was no hesitation in his words. The communications array powered up and sent humanity's response out into the void. Jake had written the message himself and gotten approval from the United Earth Council. But the words needed to come from him, from the person who was actually here facing the unknown. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Nations Ship Frontier, representing the human species of Earth," he said, and he spoke clearly so the translation systems would have no trouble with his meaning. "We acknowledge your transmission, but we do not acknowledge your authority over us. We come in peace, but we come as equals. We are approaching, and we will not stop. If you wish to speak with us, we welcome dialogue. If you wish to threaten us, then know that humanity does not yield to ultimatums." He nodded to Ryan, who cut the transmission, and the bridge stayed silent for a long moment. "Maintain course and speed," Jake ordered, and he walked back to his command chair. "They wanted to know what kind of species we are, and now they know." Maria let out a breath she had been holding. "They are definitely going to respond to that, Commander," she said, and she did not sound happy about it. "I am counting on it," Jake replied, and he settled into his chair. We are not going to start our relationship with the galaxy by crawling on our knees and begging for permission to exist. Karen Hughes spoke up from the communication station. Sir, what if they actually do attack us? She asked, and her concern was reasonable because they were one ship against an entire galactic civilization. Then we defend ourselves, Jake said simply. But I do not think they will, at least not right away. They have been watching us for 3 centuries, and they have seen what humans do when we are pushed into corners. We fight back. Ryan checked his sensors and frowned. Should I prepare evasive maneuvers just in case? Not yet, Jake said. We hold our course and we wait to see what they do next. Sometimes the best weapon is confidence. The ship continued forward through the darkness, and behind them Earth was 47 light-years away. Ahead of them was the unknown, and an entire galaxy that was about to learn that humanity would not be controlled or contained. Jake Morrison had sent a message that could not be taken back, and now he would see if his gamble would pay off or if he had just started a war that humanity could not win. The Galactic Council chamber exploded into chaos as representatives from 47 different species watched the human transmission for the 3rd time. Ambassador Thelnara stood at the center of the circular room, and her translucent body shifted through colors that showed her distress. Her sensory stalks moved in agitated patterns as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. No emerging species had ever responded this way to the containment directive, and she had no protocol for handling such open defiance. Jurist Kralvan slammed one of his clawed appendages against his station, and his reptilian face twisted with anger. This is unacceptable, he declared, and his voice carried across the chamber. Sterilization protocols must be initiated immediately before this insolence spreads to other emerging species. Around the chamber, other representatives voiced their opinions, and the translators struggled to keep up with dozens of languages being spoken at once. Some demanded immediate military action while others called for caution, but all of them agreed on one thing. The humans had broken every rule that governed first contact. Ambassador Pixel spoke through crystalline resonances that chimed like bells. I have reviewed their transmission 17 times, the crystalline being said. They claim to come in peace, but they refuse our most basic requirement, which is submission to council authority during the evaluation period. Thelnara raised her primary appendages and called for silence. As the current council moderator, she was responsible for guiding the response, and she knew that whatever decision was made in the next few hours would echo across the galaxy for generations. She had studied Earth and its people for decades, ever since they were classified as a developing intelligence. Something about their response troubled her, but not in the way it troubled the others. We should consider what this means before we act, Thelnara said carefully, and she kept her colors neutral. The humans say they come as equals, and they refuse to accept our authority without discussion. They all say they come in peace, Kralvan hissed, and he leaned forward in his seat. Every species claims peaceful intentions until they learn what resources exist in council space. Then their true nature reveals itself. It is better to contain them now or eliminate them if necessary. Commerce Director Veltran shimmered in his containment field, and his gaseous form pulsed with what the translators interpreted as frustration. The protocols exist because unregulated species create chaos, he said. They disrupt trade routes and violate territorial agreements and consume resources without consideration for the greater balance. The humans must be brought under control immediately. Thelnara accessed the human transmission again and studied the face of the one called Morrison. She saw fear in his expression, but also determination and something else that interested her greatly. There was defiance in his eyes, but it was not the defiance of aggression. It was the defiance of someone who refused to be treated as inferior. They achieved faster than light travel independently, she noted, and she made sure her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. Their mathematical approach is entirely original and shows no influence from any known council technology, which makes them more dangerous, not less. Kralvan insisted, and several other representatives voiced their agreement. Or it makes them more valuable, Thelnara countered. How many species in this chamber achieved faster than light capability on their own without guidance or shared technology? The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence because everyone knew the answer. Most council species had been given the technology after years of petitioning for membership. The council maintained its power partly through the careful control of advanced knowledge. Species were kept dependent and manageable. The tactical coordinator spoke up from his station. "The human vessel continues toward Kepler Station," he reported. "At their current speed, they will arrive in 3 standard cycles." Kepler Station was one of the Council's largest hubs, with over 10 million beings from dozens of species living and working there. If the humans reached it, the situation would become far more complicated, because then other species would interact with them directly, and the Council would lose its ability to control the narrative. "Deploy the containment fleet," Kralvon ordered, and he did not wait for Thelnara's approval. "I want 50 vessels forming a barrier pattern directly in their path. If they do not stop, then we will stop them permanently." Thelnara wanted to object, but she could see that fear had taken hold of the chamber. The council members were afraid of losing control, and afraid of a species that refused to follow the established order. She knew that fighting this decision would only undermine her authority. "Very well," she said quietly. "Deploy the fleet, but keep all communication channels open. If they are willing to talk, then we should be willing to listen." Aboard the UNS Frontier, the alarms began sounding 6 hours after Jake's message went out. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper's hands moved quickly across his console as he processed the new sensor data. "Multiple contacts, Commander," he announced, and his voice was tight with tension. "I count 50 ships of various sizes and configurations. They are forming a blockade pattern directly in our path." Jake moved to the tactical display and studied the formations. The alien vessels were smaller than the Frontier, but they outnumbered his ship 50 to 1. Their weapons and defensive capabilities were completely unknown, which made any confrontation extremely dangerous. "Distance to intercept?" Jake asked. 6 hours at current speed," Ryan replied. "Reduce to 1/4 thrust," Jake ordered. "I want time to think about our options, Lieutenant Karen Hughes. Do we have any new communications from them?" Karen checked her frequencies and shook her head. "Negative, sir, just the original halt directive repeating on loop." Jake walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars while his crew waited for orders. Behind him, he could feel their trust and their fear. They had followed him this far because they believed in the mission, but now they were facing a fleet that could probably destroy them if it came to combat. "Permission to speak freely, sir," Ryan said from his station. "Granted," Jake replied without turning around. "We knew this might happen," Ryan continued. "We knew they might not welcome us with open arms, but we also knew that hiding on Earth forever was not an option. Sooner or later, we had to take this risk." "He is right, Commander," Maria added from engineering. "Dr. Hamilton told me before we left that the worst thing we could do is show weakness. These species organize themselves into some kind of empire, and empires only respect strength, or they crush anything that challenges them," Jake said quietly. He made his decision and turned back to face his crew. "Karen, prepare another transmission. Ryan, maintain course and current speed. I want to reach that fleet with enough time to maneuver if we need to, but I want them to see that we are not backing down." "Aye, sir." They responded together. Jake composed his thoughts and then nodded to Karen, who opened the channel. "This is Commander Morrison again," he said, and he spoke with the same calm confidence as before. "We see your fleet and we understand that you want us to stop, but stopping is not in our nature. We have come too far and struggled too hard to turn back now. We are willing to talk and we are willing to negotiate, but we will not be caged and we will not be contained. We are humanity and we are approaching. Choose dialogue or choose conflict, because the decision is yours to make." The 6 hours passed slowly as the UNS Frontier continued toward the alien fleet. Jake Morrison ordered his crew to run combat drills, not because he wanted to fight, but because they needed to stay focused on something other than their fear. Every person on the bridge worked with quiet efficiency, and everyone understood that these might be the last hours of their lives. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lieutenant Karen Hughes sat at her communication station, monitoring every frequency for any response from the Council fleet. She had joined the Deep Space program because she dreamed of making first contact and building bridges between humanity and whatever lay beyond Earth's solar system. She had imagined peaceful meetings and cultural exchanges, but not this standoff with 50 warships blocking their path. "Commander, we are receiving a new transmission," Karen said suddenly, and her voice rose with surprise. "This one is different from the automated messages. Someone actually wants to talk to us." "Put it through," Jake ordered, and he straightened in his command chair. The view screen flickered and then displayed an image that made everyone on the bridge stare in wonder. The being that appeared was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Thelnara's body was translucent and shifted through different colors as she moved. Multiple sensory stalks extended from her head and waved in patterns that seemed to carry meaning. The translation software worked to interpret her speech into English. "Commander Morrison, I am moderator, Thelnara of the Galactic Council," she said, and her voice had a musical quality even through the translation. "I have been authorized to speak with you directly." Jake stood and moved closer to the screen. "Thank you for responding, moderator," he said. "We hope that this conversation could prevent unnecessary violence." "That depends entirely on your next actions," Thelnara replied, and her colors shifted to something darker. "You have entered regulated space without permission, and you refuse to follow protocols that have maintained peace for thousands of years. Explain to us why we should not view you as a hostile threat." "Because we are not a threat," Jake said firmly. "We are explorers and scientists. We want to learn and to share knowledge and to find our place among the stars. We mean no harm to anyone." "Many species have made identical claims," Thelnara said. "History has proven such promises to be unreliable when resources and territory are involved. Then judge us by our actions, and not by your past experiences with other species," Jake argued. "We have made no aggressive moves and we have harmed no one. We simply wish to be treated with the respect that any intelligent species deserves." Thelnara's colors shifted to what the translation software labeled as thoughtful consideration. "Respect must be earned, Commander," she said. "In the Galactic Council, new species must petition for membership and undergo evaluation periods that last many cycles. They accept guidance and limitations until they prove themselves ready for full participation in galactic civilization." "How long is one of your cycles?" Jake asked. "Approximately 13 of your Earth years," Thelnara answered. Jake felt his stomach tighten at those words. "You are asking us to submit to your authority for decades before we are even allowed to speak as equals in your council?" "We are asking you to follow the same path that every other species has followed," Thelnara said. "It is the path to peaceful integration into galactic society, or the path to control and domination," Jake said, and he kept his voice level despite his frustration. "Moderator, I have studied Earth's history extensively, and I have seen what happens when advanced civilizations encounter less developed ones. The story always ends the same way, with one side dominating the other and erasing their culture and independence and identity." "The Council is not like Earth," Thelnara said, but there was something in her tone that suggested uncertainty. "Is it not?" Jake challenged. "You demand that we stop immediately. You threaten sterilization if we resist. You mass 50 warships to enforce your will. That sounds remarkably like domination to me." The transmission flickered, and Jake wondered if Thelnara was consulting with other council members. Several seconds passed before she spoke again. "What would you propose instead, Commander?" she asked. "Dialogue between equals," Jake said immediately. "Let us approach your station and let us meet your council face to face. Let us make our case for why humanity deserves immediate recognition as a sovereign species with full rights." "That is impossible," Thelnara said. "The protocols exist for very important reasons that protect both established and emerging species." "Then change the protocols, or at least make an exception," Jake pressed. "We are not asking to join your council right now. We are asking to be left alone to chart our own path through the galaxy. But we are also offering something that might be valuable to you, which is a new perspective and new ideas and new solutions to problems you might not even know you have." "One ship cannot bargain with a civilization of billions," Thelnara said. "One ship can start a conversation," Jake replied. "That is all we are asking for, which is a chance to talk face to face as equals." The transmission ended abruptly and the view screen went dark. For a moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Ryan broke the silence. "Did she just hang up on us?" he asked. "I think we gave her something to think about," Jake said. "Karen, any change in the fleet's position?" "Negative, sir," Karen reported. "They are holding their formation and waiting." "Then we do the same," Jake said. "Maria, how are our supplies holding up?" "We can maintain position here for 3 weeks if necessary," the chief engineer answered. Jake nodded. "Then we wait, because sometimes patience is the most powerful weapon we have." But 18 hours later, everything changed. Karen suddenly sat up straight at her station and her hands moved rapidly across her controls. "Commander, I am picking up a distress signal," she said urgently. "It is coming from deeper in council space beyond their fleet. The signal is badly fragmented, but I am reading massive energy signatures that look like weapons fire. Jake moved to her station. Can you get a clear source? Working on it now, Karen said. Wait, there is a visual component attached to the signal, routing it to the main screen. The image that appeared was chaotic and clearly came from a damaged vessel that was tumbling through space. Through heavy static, they could see what looked like a mining colony under attack. Dozens of small civilian ships were trying to escape, while larger warships fired on them without mercy. Explosions bloomed in the darkness as escape pods and cargo vessels were destroyed. They are slaughtering them, Maria whispered, and her voice was filled with horror. Who is attacking? Jake demanded. The attacking ships do not match any configuration in the Council fleet, Karen said. These look like raiders or pirates. They are just killing everyone. Jake watched the massacre unfold on his screen and felt his decision crystallize. This was the moment that would define everything. He could maintain the standoff with the Council, or he could act. Karen, open a channel to moderator Thelnara immediately, Jake ordered. Tell her we are receiving a distress signal and request permission to render assistance. Sir, if we break formation, the Council fleet might interpret it as an attack, Ryan warned. Noted, Jake said. Send the message anyway. The response came back in less than a minute, and Thelnara appeared on screen. For the first time, Jake saw something like genuine emotion in her alien features. Commander, that is the Velix mining colony, she said, and her colors pulsed with distress. The attackers are a species called the Ragath, who we expelled from the Council 20 cycles ago for repeated violations of law. They raid our outer territories and take whatever they want. We have ships responding, but they are 2 cycles away. We can be there in 30 minutes, Jake said. Give us clearance to engage. You wish to fight for a Council colony? Thelnara asked, and her surprise was obvious. Why would you do this? Because it is the right thing to do, Jake said simply. Because those are innocent people dying, and because that is what humanity does. We help those who need it regardless of politics. Thelnara stared at the human commander through the view screen, and her colors shifted rapidly as she processed what he had just offered. The Velix colony was dying, and her own forces were too far away to help. But this unknown species that she had been threatening just minutes ago was volunteering to fight. It made no logical sense according to everything the Council knew about emerging species. They were supposed to be cautious and self-interested and focused only on their own survival. Commander Morris and the Ragath are extremely dangerous, Thelnara said, and she wanted him to understand the risk. They have been raiding our territories for 20 cycles, and we have lost many ships trying to stop them. Then we do not have time to debate this, Jake said. Moderator, will you give us clearance to pass through your fleet or not? Thelnara made her decision in that moment. Council fleet, this is Moderator Thelnara, speaking with direct authority from the central chamber, she announced on the command frequency. Stand down immediately and allow the human vessel to pass through your formation. All ships in range are ordered to proceed to Velix colony and render whatever assistance is possible. Jake did not waste a single second. Ryan, plot the fastest course to that colony, he ordered. Maria, I want full power to weapons and shields. Karen broadcast to the colony that help is on the way. The UNS Frontier broke from its position and accelerated hard toward the Velix colony. The Council ships scattered to let them pass, and then to Jake's surprise, 12 of those vessels turned and fell in behind the Frontier. They formed an impromptu task force racing toward the battle. Those are volunteer escorts, Karen reported. They are matching our speed, and they have armed all weapons. Jake felt a surge of hope cut through his fear. Maybe this was the beginning of something good. Maybe humanity could prove its worth in the most fundamental way possible by standing up for people who could not defend themselves. The Velix colony appeared on the long-range sensors, and what Jake saw made his blood run cold. 5 Ragath warships were circling the colony like predators. They were methodically destroying every escape pod and cargo vessel that tried to flee. Bodies and debris floated in clouds around the dying station. The massacre was even worse than the initial distress signal had shown. Arm all weapons, Jake ordered, and his voice was hard as steel. But I want warning shots first. Give them one chance to withdraw. Sir, we do not know how powerful their shields are or what kind of weapons they have, Maria cautioned from engineering. We could be flying into something we cannot handle. Then we are about to find out together, Jake said. Ryan, take us in. The UNS Frontier dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the Valix colony with all weapons charged and shields at maximum power. The 5 Ragath ships immediately turned away from their prey to face this new threat. They were larger than Jake had expected, with dark hulls covered in what looked like battle scars from dozens of previous fights. Jake opened a channel on all frequencies. "Ragath vessels, this is the UNS Frontier," he announced. "Cease your attack on the colony immediately and withdraw from this system, or we will be forced to engage you." The only response was a massive barrage of plasma fire that slammed into the Frontier's shields. The ship shook violently and alarms started blaring across the bridge. "Shields holding at 73%, Maria called out. "That plasma is hot enough to melt steel." "So much for diplomacy," Ryan muttered as his hands flew across the navigation controls. "Executing evasive pattern Delta." "Return fire," Jake ordered. "Target their weapons and engines, disable them if possible." The battle that followed was brief but brutal. The Ragath ships were powerful, and their captains clearly had years of combat experience. They moved in coordinated patterns, trying to overwhelm the Frontier with concentrated fire. But they had never faced human military technology before, and that gave Jake's crew the edge they needed. The Frontier's railguns had been developed from centuries of theoretical physics research. When they fired, the magnetic accelerators launched projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The Ragath shields were designed to deflect energy weapons, but they could not stop solid matter moving that fast. The first salvo punched clean through 2 Ragath vessels and sent them spinning out of control. The missile systems were even more devastating. Human artificial intelligence had advanced to the point where each missile could think and adapt during flight. The Council had banned such technology centuries ago because they feared it was too dangerous, but humanity had no such restrictions. The missiles found weak points in the Ragath shields and exploited them with ruthless efficiency. Within 6 minutes, 3 of the Ragath vessels were crippled and running for the edge of the system. The 4th tried to ram the Frontier in a desperate suicide attack, but Ryan saw it coming and rolled the ship out of the way. The 5th Ragath captain made the mistake of refusing to break off his attack on the civilian ships. 2 railgun shots destroyed his engines, and a spread of missiles finished the job. The 12 Council vessels arrived just as the last Ragath ship jumped to faster-than-light speed and limped away from the battle zone. The colony was saved, but at a terrible cost. Hundreds of civilian vessels had been destroyed before the Frontier arrived. "All Ragath vessels have withdrawn or been neutralized," Karen reported. "The colony is secure and they are hailing us, Commander." Jake leaned back in his chair and realized his hands were shaking. "Casualties on our ship? Minor injuries to 3 crew members in engineering when we took that first hit," Maria said. "Shields are down to 41%, but the hull is intact and all critical systems are operational." "And the colony?" Jake asked. Karen listened to the incoming transmissions. "They are saying we saved over 12,000 lives, Commander," she said quietly. "Without our intervention, everyone would have died." Jake closed his eyes for a moment and let that number sink in. 12,000 living beings who would go home to their families because his crew had chosen to act instead of standing by. Whatever else happened, this had been worth it. "Moderator Thelnara is requesting another channel," Karen announced. "Put her through," Jake said. Thelnara appeared on screen, and her colors were something the translation software had never encountered before. After a moment of processing, it settled on describing the display as profound amazement, mixed with gratitude. "Commander Morrison, in all my cycles of service, I have never witnessed such combat effectiveness from a single vessel," she said, and her voice carried genuine awe. "You destroyed Ragath warships that have terrorized our borders for years, and you did it in minutes." "We did what needed to be done, Moderator," Jake said simply. "How many civilians did we manage to save?" "Preliminary reports indicate over 12,000 survivors from the colony and the escape vessels," Thelnara answered. "Without your immediate response, they would all have perished. The Council owes humanity a debt." Jake saw his opportunity. "Moderator, we would like to send medical teams and engineers to the colony if you will permit it," he said. "We have supplies that could help the survivors, and our people are trained for disaster response." "Permission is granted, Commander," Thelnara said immediately. "And when you have finished rendering aid, I would very much like to continue our earlier conversation. I believe the Council needs to hear what you have to say, and I believe we need to reconsider some of our assumptions about your species." The transmission ended, and Jake stood up from his chair. Ryan, coordinate with the council ships and set up a relief operation, he ordered. Maria, get damage control teams working on our shields. Karen, start organizing medical supplies and personnel. Everyone did excellent work today, and I am proud of every single one of you. As his crew moved to follow orders, Jake looked out at the damaged colony and the debris field that surrounded it. Humanity had just fought its first battle in space and won, but more importantly, they had proven that their words about helping others were not empty promises. The galaxy was watching now, and the message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they were not going away. 3 days after the battle at Velik's colony, Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 47 species watching his every move. The chamber was even more impressive in person than it had been through the viewscreen transmissions. Holographic displays covered the walls, showing a map of the entire galaxy, divided into territories and zones of control. It was a monument to thousands of years of careful organization, and now Jake was about to ask them to change everything. Moderator Thelnara had granted him 1 hour to address the full council. Around the circular chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds watched him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. High Juris Kralvan glared at Jake with pure hatred, because the human victory at Velix had made his massive fleet look weak and ineffective. But there were others who seemed genuinely interested in what Jake had to say. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, and he kept his voice steady and confident. I stand before you today not to request membership in your organization, but to ask for something much simpler, which is recognition of humanity as a sovereign species with the right to determine our own future. You dare to make demands after violating our territorial space? Kralvan hissed, and his claws scraped against his station. I dare to request basic rights after saving 12,000 of your citizens, Jake replied calmly. But let us address your claim about territorial violations. You say this is your space based on what exactly? The fact that you arrived first, or the fact that you have enough military power to enforce your claims? Those are the arguments of empire, not civilization. A ripple of surprised conversation moved through the chamber. No one had ever challenged the Council's authority so directly in this forum. Commander Morrison raises a point worth considering, Ambassador Pixel said, and the crystalline being's voice chimed softly. We present ourselves as a council of equals, yet we demand complete submission from emerging species. Perhaps we should examine this contradiction. The protocols exist to maintain order and prevent chaos, Commerce Director Veltran argued, and his gaseous form pulsed with agitation. Without these rules, new species would clash over resources and territory. Conflicts would erupt constantly, and the peace we have maintained for thousands of cycles would collapse. Or perhaps, Jake said carefully, new species would bring fresh perspectives and innovative solutions and remind you why you formed this council in the first place. Was it to promote genuine cooperation? Or was it to enforce conformity and maintain control? He activated a small device that projected images from Earth's history into the center of the chamber. My species has made terrible mistakes, Jake continued. We have fought devastating wars that killed millions. We destroyed large parts of our environment. We came close to making our own planet uninhabitable, but we learned from those mistakes and we grew. We formed a unified planetary government that respects regional differences while working toward common goals for all humanity. And you expect us to simply trust that you will continue to learn and grow? Kralvan demanded. I expect you to give us the same opportunity that you gave yourselves, Jake said. Look at your own histories and tell me honestly how many of your species achieved unity through peaceful means. How many had to overcome internal conflicts and divisions? Did anyone step in and force you to behave a certain way? Or were you allowed to find your own path forward? Thelnara spoke, and her colors shifted to thoughtful patterns. The commander raises a difficult question that we have perhaps avoided for too long, she said. We have become comfortable with our systems and our control. Perhaps we have become too comfortable. The Ragath are proof of what happens when species reject council authority, Kralvan countered angrily. They refused our guidance and became raiders and murderers who prey on innocent civilians. The Ragath were expelled for committing crimes against other species, Thelnara said firmly. That is fundamentally different from a species seeking independence and self-determination. There is a distinction we must acknowledge. Jake pressed forward while he had support. I am not asking you to dissolve your council or abandon your laws within your own territories, he said. I am asking you to recognize that the galaxy is vast enough for different approaches to civilization. Let humanity govern itself and chart its own course. If we fail, then that responsibility falls on us. But if we succeed, then perhaps we can teach you something new. And if you become a threat to council space? Feltran asked. Then you have the same options you have always had, Jake answered. But judge us by our actual actions and not by your fears about what we might do. We could have run when your fleet arrived, but we stayed. We could have ignored the distress call from Valix, but we responded. We could have demanded payment for our help, but we gave it freely. Judge us by those choices. The chamber fell into heavy silence. Jake could see the internal struggle on many alien faces as they wrestled with ideas that challenged beliefs held for thousands of years. He had said everything he came to say, and now the decision was in their hands. Finally, Thelnara rose from her position. I propose a compromise that might satisfy all parties, she announced. We grant humanity provisional independence for a period of 1 cycle. You will be free to govern yourselves and explore as you wish and engage in trade and diplomacy with any species that chooses to interact with you. However, you will also accept an exchange program where council observers can learn about humanity. While human observers learn about us, at the end of 13 Earth years we will reconvene and evaluate whether the arrangement should become permanent. 13 years of provisional status, Jake said slowly as he considered the offer. That is acceptable to me provided the observers have no authority over human decisions and are present only to facilitate understanding between our peoples. Agreed, Thelnara said. All council members in favor of this proposal, please signal now. Jake watched as lights began appearing around the chamber, indicating votes in favor of the compromise. Not all of them voted yes because Kralvon and several others clearly opposed any recognition of humanity. But when the counting finished, there was a clear majority in favor. The measure passes with sufficient support, Thelnara declared, and her colors brightened noticeably. Humanity is hereby recognized as a sovereign species with full navigation rights and commercial privileges in Galactic Council space. Welcome to the community of worlds, Commander Morrison. Jake felt tension drain from his body that he had been carrying for days. Thank you, moderator, he said. On behalf of all humanity, I accept these terms and I look forward to building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than domination. As Jake left the council chamber, he found Lieutenant Karen Hughes waiting with Ryan Cooper and Maria Santos. They had watched the entire proceeding from a gallery reserved for observers. We actually did it, Karen said, and her voice was filled with wonder. We stood up to an entire galactic government and won recognition as equals. We started something important, Jake corrected gently. Now comes the truly hard part, which is proving that we deserve the trust they have placed in us. How do we do that? Ryan asked. Jake looked through the massive windows that showed dozens of alien ships moving through space around Kepler Station. We do exactly what we came out here to do, he said. We explore and we learn and we help where we can. We show them that humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our technology, but our refusal to accept that things must always stay the way they have always been. That sounds good, but will it actually work? Maria asked with a slight smile. Ask me again in 13 years. Jake replied. The UNS Frontier departed from Kepler Station 2 days later and continued its mission of exploration into the unknown regions of space. Behind them, the Galactic Council began the slow and difficult process of adapting to a galaxy that had suddenly become less predictable and more interesting. Some species were excited by the change while others were frightened, but all of them understood that something fundamental had shifted. Across Earth, the news of council recognition spread like wildfire. Humanity celebrated not because they had been accepted into an existing power structure, but because they had refused to surrender their independence and dignity. They had approached the unknown as equals, and the unknown had been forced to acknowledge them. The galaxy had maintained its silence for thousands of years while enforcing rigid control over every emerging species. But humanity had sent a clear warning that things were about to change. We are approaching, they had said, and they had meant every word. Now the real adventure could finally begin, and no one knew where it would lead, but everyone understood that the galaxy would never be quite the same again.